Not leather hard, but getting to that stage, and it should be pretty cool to the touch. But when you touch it, it doesn't like mold or get sticky on your hands. And then the first step is you're gonna look at the wheel, and if your wheel head has these spirals, you can use those spiral lines. If it doesn't have spiral lines, I like to take a pencil and just draw a line on it. So I think almost all these wheels do, but in the future if you don't. So you're just going to start kicking the wheel, and you want it to go about this height and this speed. And you're just going to take your pencil, anchor it in, and you'll just draw a nice, even, centered line. So that's if you didn't have a line on your wheel, which almost all these wheels have lines, I think. But you could run into that in the future. Then what you're going to do is you're going to try to match up your rim with the lines. So mine almost matches perfectly with that. And sometimes the rim is different than the base of your pot, the foot of it. And so what you do to check that is you take a needle tool and you just turn your wheel on, and you want it to be about like medium speed. So if you're doing it on the kick wheel, you want it to be about medium speed as if it was on the regular wheel. And I'm just taking my foot, kind of sliding it around. Then I'm going to anchor this needle tool with my wrist and just glide it around the outside of my pot and just kind of see where it hits. And I'm just holding it still, and it's just hitting against certain areas. So when I stop it, you can see here, there's a nice distinct line there, and there's not a line over here. So that means it's not centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently scooch it ever so slightly so that hopefully now it's centered. So now what I'm going to do is start kicking it again and try this again. And I'm still getting hitting here, so I'm going to stop the wheel, see where that line is hitting, and scooch it a little bit again. And this is kind of a long process, so you have to just be patient with it. And if you start to get too many lines, you can just get a little water, smooth that line out so you don't get confused. And it's still hitting off here. So I find that line again and just tap it ever so slightly the other direction. Hopefully. And it's almost hitting everywhere, but not quite here. I just want to get it to the point where my needle tool just glides around it and makes an even line. Like that. So now my needle tool is just making an even line around the whole pot, and I'm just holding it steady. And that's when I know that this base part is in the center of the wheel. And then what you're going to do is, now that you have it centered, is you're going to take a chunk of clay, and it doesn't have to be wedged, it can be not wedged clay. You're going to kind of roll it into like a, I don't know, a little worm type of shape. And what you're going to do is you want to always have a hand on the top of your pot, so that way it doesn't scooch out of place. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that and you're going to press your little worm into the wheel head, not into your pot. But it's attaching to my pot, as you can see. So it's nice anchored. And then I'm going to just do that on the same side, on the opposite side. Take another piece, roll it up, hold it with my hand so I don't throw it off center. And I want to do it on all four sides so it's nice and secure, so that way if I accidentally bump it or something, it's all good. It's going to stay in place. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually trimming here. So I want it to go back to that medium speed that I was checking the center at, and I'm just going to take my first I'm going to start with this rib because I like to start with the big ones first. And I actually have probably about that much room I can trim off. So, sorry, scratch that. I'm going to start by drawing a line as to where I want to trim to. So, I think I want to trim a foot this deep. So, notice how I'm anchoring and holding my hand nice and steady. This needle tool isn't moving around at all in my hand. So, I've drawn a line, so I'm going to cut off all this clay from where it's centered here to this line. So you'll see what happens now. So then I'm going to take my tool. And I chose that line kind of because I want it to kind of match the inside of my pot. When I'm doing this, I'm always thinking about how the shape is going to relate to the inner side of my bowl, because that's a big part of trimming and just being aware. Remember how I was talking to you about how potters sometimes aren't considered artists? Well, this is how I think it creates art. Because when you look at a bowl at home, you're not going to find a hand-carved foot like this. It's most of the time the bowls that you find at home don't have any details on the bottom of them. They're literally just flat pieces there. And they don't even think about all these little things. I'm always thinking about how I want my viewer to be looking at this pot from all angles. So when they hold it, the bottom is just as important as the top of it to me. Like I was saying, how I love the lip to be nice and smooth. Well, I love the foot to be nice and mimic the inside of the pot. So what I'm doing here is I'm literally just holding my tool steady with my hand. Everything's anchored here. And I'm just letting the pot do the work for me. And it's just peeling away at the clay. And I'm just trying to get it to match that line. So sometimes I'll take it and wash off the clay so that way it doesn't get all messed up and sticky. And I'll just go back in and cut off. You can even, if you want to anchor your hand like this too, put one finger on the middle of the pot. Some people like to use lids from like Gatorade so that their hand can just glide around the top of the pot. Right now, I'm just going to do it this way. If you're having trouble keeping your hand steady, that kind of helps out. There's so many ways to trim. You can actually tap it into center. You know how I was using the needle tool? There's another way that you can actually just tap the side of the pot to get it in the middle of the wheel while it's spinning. That takes a lot of skill. So my whole body, remember, I'm using my whole body, like keeping it anchored, my abs are even tight. It's a whole process. Ceramics is so much about like physical qualities too, you know. I don't know if anyone's arms are really sore today, but mine are from centering for about 2 days straight. But it's kind of just mesmerizing to watch it just trim off. So I'm finally approaching that line that I drew. And notice how it's such a better shape on the outside. So if I stop it, you can see it's such a nicer shape to the foot. And I just literally trimmed off about that much of my pot. And it's also going to make it a lot less heavy. So you guys are going to have at least this much to trim off. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I made these little rib lines here. And I want to mimic that because I want it to be, that's just a detail that I'm really into. So I'm going to take my tool. I'm going to use this corner here. And I'm just going to put my pinky on the outside edge just to keep myself centered here. And I'm just going to go in and start to mimic those lines by just putting that corner into it and tracing it down until I get to that bottom line. You can even pick it up move it. Because I love these little subtle details. And how I got those lines on there when I was originally trimming was just by using my fingernail, actually. So now that I have those lines, I'm just going to make sure this foot is nice and flattened here too. So I'm just going to take the flat edge of this tool and just glide it around the top of this pot. And it's actually, you know, I was telling you all to make sure there's like about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom of your pot. You actually have enough room to carve in and add to that foot so it's not just flat. So like I was saying, how a lot of, you know, bought pots have those flat feet. This one isn't going to have a flat foot because I'm going to make it a little bit more unique. I'm going to take my tool here now that I've flattened this out so I know it'll meet the table nice and smooth. I'm going to draw another line. And I'm actually going to cut away the inside of this to go to this other line so that it just gives it a unique looking bottom. And I'm going to take a smaller tool and I'm going to start with the circular end. And I'm just going to start from the inside here and just slowly creep my hand towards the outside. And it might want to pull you, that's why it's really important to be very anchored. It's the same thing as centering, same thing as pulling up, you have to be anchored, or this baby's just going to fly all over the place. And these kick wheels are really nice because you can really control the speed here. I'm going to flip it over because I want it to be maybe a little bit more flat. And just bring it out again towards that edge. I'm going to create like just a distinct line here. And I kind of liked that way that it was starting to look, how it had like, it looked like stairs almost, so maybe I'll try and do that. I just blow off some of this stuff. So I'm going to actually then do another line to make it look like stairs on the bottom here. And this is just those like fine little details that you're not going to get unless it's handmade. So I'm going to go in and trim a little bit more off. And you want to be careful, you don't want to go through your pot. You start to get a feeling for how deep it is and how much room you have once you really start to trim. But if you tap the bottom of your pot, you can kind of feel how much room you have to cut off there. Alright, so now I'm pretty happy with that foot. And what I'm going to do is just get this last little detail. You can actually rethrow with this clay, which is pretty cool. So if you really hate your bottom, you can totally rethrow it if you just get it wet again. But I'm just going to get these little sharp edges off so that way if the glaze hits, it doesn't cut anyone. So it gets that kind of like that rounded shape again, that's matching, you know, the rounded shape of my lip, the inside of my pot. And I just want to take my index finger and make sure it's totally smooth there. So this is going to be the spot that hits the table, and I want to make sure that's totally flat. And it's going to hit the table really nicely. A lot of people try to skip over this trimming step, but it's, I think, one of the most important steps. And I'm just holding my hand really steady here so that it doesn't come off the wheel. And get that nice flattened surface here. I'm using that flat edge. Because that's the worst when your pot wobbles when it touches the table. Nobody wants that. So, let's stop it. And I'm pretty happy with that. And maybe see how there's like a little bit of clay here? I might go back in with my tool and just kind of, while it's on, trim that off. Or maybe get more distinct lines. It's up to you. But this is just, you can do so many things with this. And I'll take it off here, but I'll show you once it's done. You can just really see how I've thought about the whole pot here. So the inside now mimics the outside. It doesn't just stop off. It comes in at that nice little point there. Cool, right? So you guys can just get creative as much as you want with the foot. And it totally changed my shape.